Sometimes all it takes is one strong idea to make a game work. Among the Sleep takes that one idea and stretches it no farther than I want it to go, and creates a lingering experience that I actually find more exciting now that it's behind me. Which is funny considering how long I'd been looking forward to this game after looking at its Kickstarter campaign a couple years ago. Among the Sleep is a first-person horror game with environmental puzzles and physics-based object interaction, which basically opens up to direct comparison with games like Amnesia. But its standout feature is that everything unfolds from the perspective of a toddler. While independent horror games about children are nothing new, marrying that with a first-person perspective is novel. The only other game I've ever seen that puts me behind the eyeballs of such a young protagonist was Fallout 3, and even then, it was only for a few minutes at the beginning of the game. Among the Sleep, on the other hand, creates an entire story in which you are small and vulnerable, and everything around you seems huge and intimidating, immersing you in a scary, surreal world made all the more so by just how familiar everything is. That is, of course, while the immersion is maintained. Among the Sleep suffers from a lack of polish that is sadly common in indie games, which sometimes results in sticky physics, clipping issues, and inconsistent animation and texture quality. The trailer for the game's Kickstarter seems to indicate a much more technically competent game, and with an art style that leaned on stark realism more than the storybook-inspired look that the game has now. It turns out that this look is a better fit for the game as a whole because much of the game takes place in dreamscapes, but before I knew that, I had been given the impression that I'd be playing something that tried hard for photorealism, and with that impression in mind, the opening scenes of the game fall very short of that, and the art style doesn't really click until you're no longer in the real world. If I hadn't heard about the game well before its completion, this wouldn't have been an issue for me, so I think the best way to experience Among the Sleep is to play it without knowing anything about it first. The game is very short, and will probably take most players just one sitting to complete. If it were a more expensive game, then this would also be an issue, but it's pretty cheap, and the premise and gameplay are so simple that keeping it short prevents it from overstaying its welcome. This game has a powerful and affecting story, but it is entirely dependent on revelation, which is why I'm saying very little about it. But it will likely entice you back into replaying the game just to see events unfold with a clear understanding of what's happening, so you'll definitely get your money's worth in terms of time spent with the game. Among the Sleep is not as good as it should be, but its central idea is strong enough to make the experience worthwhile, and all of its good qualities stem from that. Much like childhood itself, it might not be so great when you're actually going through it, but looking back on it elicits emotions unlike any other, because the good and the bad things you've experienced are all a part of you now. Among the Sleep is relatable because we were all children once, and its many shortcomings aren't quite enough to muffle its resonant horrors as they rumble around in your mind after the credits roll.